You open your eyes slowly as you wake from a deep sleep. However, you see yourself surrounded by flashing lights and switches. As your eyes adjust, your memory of the night before starts to come back to you. You traveled back into the past to meet your grandfather, who had originally died just after you were born. In excitement, you open the small door of your time machine, expecting to see your grandfather's house. This was it, your final chance to meet him. As you open the door, your eyes seem to betray you, because all you see are the ruins of a crushed house and a dead body right below you. Slowly, you realize that this is your grandfather. You try to understand what exactly went wrong, but as you look down, you notice your body starts to disappear, almost as if you never existed at all. Let's rewind the clock now, back to when you first activated your time machine. There was a lot of research needed to figure out how to go back in time and how to prevent any paradoxes from happening. You researched everything you could about time travel and its possible consequences. From Einstein's general relativity to a Russian scientist's idea of a closed time loop. After months of studying, you finally come to the unfortunate conclusion that nobody could exactly agree on how time travel could work, let alone its many consequences. However, this would not stop you from meeting your grandfather, so you continued to build. After a year, you were finally ready to test it. You got into your time machine, and with fear of not knowing what could happen, you hit the start button to go back in time. When you landed directly on your grandfather's house, you crushed him to death and set off a ripple of events that you could never hope to predict. Regardless, you still tried your best, but how could this happen? What could have gone wrong? You should have landed right in front of your grandfather's house, not on top of it. But this was no time to be thinking about this, since you yourself were a ticking time bomb. Your body was disappearing and you had to act fast. You thought about all the possible consequences of changing the past and remembered one specific problem: the grandfather paradox. If your grandfather never existed, then your parents would not have met. That means you would never have existed. This still didn't do you any good, and you needed to stop this paradox from happening. You thought harder and time seemed to slow down. Were there any solutions for this paradox that could save you? Then, a spark goes off in your mind when you figure out that there was one solution that would not only stop this paradox, but also save your grandfather. You crack a smile as you close your eyes, and you finally disappear. As you wake up, you realize that you are not only alive, but are in your room. You jump out of bed and run towards an image that was taken of you and your grandparents after you were born. You sigh in relief to see your grandfather still there. After all, right before you disappeared, you had figured it out. The reason that there was no paradox was because if you were to change history, even in a small way, it would create a different timeline or universe where history would start at that changed moment. However, you would still end up back to your original timeline, because you wouldn't exist in the new one. This means that, although you could change your past, you would never experience its future. You're stuck with what you've got, even with the power of a time machine. Time travel is complicated, and even with all the research being done on it, there are still many different ideas of what could happen. Many of us would like to change our painful past, so time travel is an exciting idea. With the unexplored limits of the universe, however, time travel is just one among many things that evoke infinite wonder. We hope you enjoyed our look into the grandfather paradox. What would you do if you could go back in time? Share your thoughts, suggestions, and questions in the comments below. Interesting new content like this is uploaded every week, so be sure to like and subscribe to see more of Infinite Wonder.